Well, we're back after a couple of weeks off. So I've obviously been over in South Africa with the
Oh, you lucky thing.
yeah, I know, with the GB rifle team shooting the World Championships, the long range World Championships.
That's
So
incredible.
I've been having a lot
So
of
come on,
fun.
no, come on, hang on a minute. You can't say that and then not tell us how you did.
Well, it's devastatingly painful. That so the World Championships is obviously a 2 day match. I say obviously, you know, not many people would know, but it's a 2 day match. Shooting at 700, 800, and 900 meters, twice across the 2 days. So out of I think it's 7,200 points is the total, and devastatingly, we lost to Australia by 4 points. So it was actually it's taken me a bit of time to get over that. Genuinely, it's
Four
been
points.
yeah, 4 points. So it was the closest match,
Bloody the
closest
Aussies
World
again
Championships
have
there's ever
beaten us.
been. I know it was
Yeah. What's
after
that?
the fifth distance. I think we were equal on points, so it was really down to the wire. We both teams smashed records previously held. So
That's this as a percentage. That's the difference. I mean,
that
that's
makes it
like
even worse. That makes me feel even worse. It was horrible. Yeah, it was
five
so
thousandths of a percent.
it was so close. So
Yeah.
usually the winner would be happy dropping like the whole team be dropping like between 100 or 200 points in total across the 2 days. This year, Australia only dropped 28. That's
Wow.
how like the kit and the scenario and the weather played a huge part because there was just no wind, which obviously made it yeah, different. But that's why I keep trying to
So
walk over
silver.
that quite quickly. So silver, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
but
got
that's still
silver.
pretty impressive.
Um yeah, first loser is the way it feels. But yeah,
So you've
it's
been off enjoying yourself in the sunshine with no wind,
yeah,
laying down in sort of 40-degree heat.
yep. Yeah, the firing point, the stones on the firing point, one of the Americans put a thermometer down and it was 55 degrees. So we were lying on that, basically lying on
You were
like sauna
cooking.
coals. Yeah, absolutely cooking. Um, but there we go. That's
Meanwhile,
yeah. Meanwhile, you've been interviewing some people, some very interesting people.
I
You've been
have.
interviewing
Yeah.
Jeff. Um, how did that come about?
Do you know, it's really funny because I thought it was spam to start with. I had an email from, I guess, somebody that worked from him, a lady called Stephanie. I didn't look in detail, actually. I ought to perhaps have a look. And they reached out to us, actually. I don't know how they found us. I forgot to ask Jeff, actually. I'll follow up with that and just find out. But yeah, I guess they'd seen a podcast or gone onto our website or they'd had an email from us or something. And yeah, they reached out and said they'd really love to be a guest, or Jeff would really love to be a guest on there. And obviously when you get requests for a guest, it's like, well, who's this? Is this just going to try and sell something, or is this, you start with that sort of natural skepticism. That's the
Yeah,
journalist in me, I think. But do you know what? He was amazing. This guy
yeah.
was
Well,
on
he's
the
done
list of stuff.
everything, hasn't he? Yeah,
Well, I mean,
it's
yeah,
quite insane.
growth strategist, innovation consultant. He's authored 2 books himself that are bestsellers and co-authored a third bestseller. He educates at a university at Central Arkansas. He's a former corporate executive with big companies, Axiom, and other stuff as well. He's been in the military. He was in the army, National Guard. He's got a doctor of education, special work in leadership and OD. He's got an MA, Master of Education, sorry, in the States for Human Resource Development, and he flies planes. And this guy, honestly, he looks younger than me, and I'm like
Oh,
28.
I'm not gonna touch that. There are too many jokes there. Uh,
But
but well,
honestly,
and also has a fantastic accent as well.
he does. He really does. Yeah, it's one of those that you can't help try and mimic. And I'm a bit of a mimic anyway.
Yeah.
I'm really good with accents, but so I was just, my one genuinely one of my concerns was I didn't sort of slip into a kind of a South Central. So how you doing?
Yeah.
Stop, Adam. But no, he was fascinating, and I think this is one of the reasons why, because there was so much information. I've decided to kind of split it into 2 parts because there's too much in one podcast, to be fair, and I think you would
Yeah.
lose track of the full learning that Jeff has provided for us. So yeah, we're going to do this as our first two-parter. Actually, I think it would be a better thing to do.
Cool. So, well, yeah, I guess if we listen to it and then have a quick wrap up of what he said before moving on to the second one.
Yeah. So for everybody, Dr. Jeff Standridge from Arkansas. Well, we have a very special guest in the office today. We have Dr. Jeff Standridge, all the way from, I got told off last night for calling it Arkansas deliberately, but it's actually Arkansas, isn't it? So
it is
Jeff,
Arkansas. Yeah.
Dr. Jeff, welcome to In the Office Cast. It's fabulous to have you here with us.
It is my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. I have fond memories of my time in the UK. And so I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem at all. It's wonderful to have a guest on. We've been a guest and we've got lots of guests lined up. We're fairly new as a podcast, but we've got tons of guests lined up from all over the show. So it's wonderful to have somebody from across in the US and somebody with, well, let's get right on with it. Let's just go through this list here. So growth strategist and innovation consultant, best-selling author of 3 books. You're an educator as well. You're a teacher at the University of Central Arkansas. You're a former executive. You've done time in the military. You've got yourself a doctorate and a master's, and you're a pilot as well. How do you fit all that in?
I'm 130 years old. I know I don't look it, but here in Arkansas, we really keep young.
I was wondering whether you had a clone and it's actually 2 people or a twin or something.
Yeah. No, I've said before, people ask me if how I'm doing today. And I said, well, if I was any better, I'd have to be twins. Too much good for one person to enjoy. And they say, oh, if there was a twin of you, we would all be in trouble. So
imagine what you could get done there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. So I've sent you a bunch of questions of things that we'd love to talk about.
Sure.
And we'll just crack on with those. I think it's wonderful to have you here and chat through. And, we're just, if you've got questions, fire them back and, anything that kind of sticks to mind, and if we got off topic, that's great.
Yeah, great.
So we'll start at the top and just go with, growth strategist. A lot of what we talk about here, and certainly the business that John and I helped John run, is all about hybrid working. It's set up a long time ago, just after the pandemic, to do a better job of the people element of that. And because at the minute, a lot of the software is all about a desk or a space, and we said, well, actually, it's more important about the people. So right. As a growth strategist, do you see hybrid working sort of in principle supporting and driving business growth with what you're seeing? Has it become part of that?
Yeah, it really has. Clearly, it's a shift from the status quo to something new and more innovative. Yeah. But I think the organizations that do it right and do it well, it ends up becoming a growth catalyst for them versus a compromise of settling for something less than ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I worked for a big American company when this all came about, and our strategy at the time was, well, there wasn't anything to base it upon. There was this, right, we have to be working from home. And what we did is we took the idea of what the big business is doing, that have got tens of thousands of people as staff, and we used that as tried to find that kind of win-win scenario of, well, if we try that, let's see what happens, and go from there. And for us, that was the way that we did that. Obviously, there's a law in April. There was a law passed in this country that you are actually allowed to ask for hybrid working, which is unique. I mean, there's caveats to that. But so, from your perspective, you mentioned there particularly about doing it well. How do you think? What does that mean, doing it well, from your perspective?
Well, so let me back up a little bit. So in the 90s, I worked for a publicly traded company in the U.S. and U.K. and otherwhere, and we had a work from home policy then. Wow. This was in the mid 90s. And at that time, what we did is you had to be a strong performer in the organization. And you then had to request work from home. And then we had a set of guidelines that said, you need to have your own workspace. You need to have an ergonomic chair and
wow.
desk. Yeah. you can't babysit your children and
Yep.
also work from home. So you need to have childcare arrangements. And if your productivity drops, we reserve the right to bring you back in house if necessary.
Yeah.
And that was 96, 98. And so, and it was very, very popular. Now, there were some people who could do it and some people who couldn't. And I think that's when I think about how organizations are doing it well today, they understand that there are some people who can't work in an unstructured work environment well.
Yeah.
They may need to be trained to work into that environment. They may need to start definitely hybrid with some time in the office and some time out of the office to learn the work skills, I guess.
Yeah.
But then also they select for those capabilities as well with their recruiting and selection process.
Yeah.
So those are some things they do. I think they use technology.
Yeah.
They still gather on a regular basis. So I work in a hybrid environment, and we have a team in Northwest Arkansas. We have a team in Central Arkansas. We go where the work is. There are days when no one's in the office, but we still come together at the same time on the same day every single week, and we do a little round robin catch up to make sure everyone's connected face to face. We also look for opportunities to get together in person. Doesn't always work, but we look for opportunities, and about I'd say most of those times when we do have those times, we're able to get 75% of us together, and sometimes it's a different 75% next month than it was the month before, and so we do see each other in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's I've written blogs about kind of some of the detail around this, and the fact that now a lot of HR people are a big part of their recruiting process. The sort of talent acquisition is very much, the hybrid working policy is it's up there now. A lot of businesses, there are some stats there that I think there was Owly, the people who make microphones for conference rooms internationally, they did a survey, and it's something like if you had a back-to-work policy that mandated 5 days in, you'd lose 50 to 60% of your team, not straight away. So this is a big deal now with the ability. I think it's more about having the choice of where is best for you, stroke the business to actually work, and the office then. And what office managers and facilities managers and even MDs and CEOs, founders, etc., need to think about the office in a different way. Is that something that you're experiencing now, seeing this as an educator and businessman, etc.?
That completely agree. Also, I believe what I'm seeing is that organizations that do it well, they still focus on building the culture that they're trying to build.
Yeah.
And they don't stop cultural development of the team. They don't stop doing those things. They just do it in a different way. The elements of what we call a culture of excellence are the same elements, whether you're an in-office work environment, you're a manufacturing environment, you're a complete hybrid or a complete remote, distributed workforce. Cultural elements are the same.
I mean, there's another point here as well. And if you look at in the company I used to work for, they had, I don't think it was 1,200 salespeople who were spread out across the whole of the US, and hybrid working for them because they were working not in the mothership, as I used to call it, but they were spread out across the whole of the US. It's like, well, we've been kind of hybrid working all our lives. Sure. And remote salespeople have. This is nothing new to them. It's just, that's right. So I guess they're probably going, what's all the fuss about?
Yeah. That's exactly right. I led a sales team for several years, and I had people all over the U.S., most of whom were working in their homes, and or out of their homes, I guess I should say. And we had a Monday morning call every single week, and I said, look, schedule your clients around the Monday morning call, because that's going to be our time to catch up and make sure that we're covering off on the things we need to cover off on. And it was our annual sales conference when we got everybody together. We got to see each other.
Yeah, and that's an important point about a culture is an organic thing, right? You have to work on it. You have to feed it.
That's right.
And it comes from the top, and there are micro cultures within businesses, but they all ultimately feed into the culture itself, and individual team leaders and managers and heads of departments, and then the senior leadership team will contribute towards that culture itself.
Agreed, completely agreed. Culture is everything about an organization. It is the shared beliefs and norms, both written and unwritten. We try to articulate the culture as a set of core values a lot of times, and that's one component.
Yeah.
But how we approach work, are we a process-oriented culture, or are we not process-oriented? Do we have a lot of rules, or do we not have a lot of rules? Do we have a lot of humor in the workplace, or do we not have a lot of humor in the workplace? Do we genuinely like the people we work with, or do we not? Do we gather for lunch? I worked in Amsterdam for a while, and the office there had kind of a kitchen area, it was almost a dining room area with two long tables, and nobody went out for lunch. They had cold cuts and sandwich makings there every day. And so they would make a sandwich and play ping pong. And that was their lunch break every day. And so they'd have a little miniature ping pong tournament. Well, that's not for every organization, but for that organization, it was very, very much part of the culture. And so in other companies I've worked in, everyone started kind of pairing up in the mornings and decided who's going to go have lunch where and when, and they would all go out at different places at 3 and 4 people at a time. And so, everything about an organization becomes part of that culture over time.
Yeah. And do you think that cultures, they're kicked off by leadership or the person who started the business? Or do you think that actually it tends to be more the new people that come in, they change the culture over a period of time, or some potentially quite quickly?
Well, you talked about microcultures. I talk about the espoused culture. This is the culture we want to have, and this is the culture in use, right? The one that we actually have. And I believe the best organizations, they create the culture that they want. They hire for that culture. They interview and select for that culture. They coach people according to that culture. They promote them according to that culture. I talk pretty black and white about core values. If you're not willing to hire someone against a set of core values, actually interview for those. And more importantly, if you're not willing to fire someone if they blatantly violate one or more of those core values, then they're really not core, and they're really not valued. They're just flowery words on a piece of paper that are stuck on a wall.
Yeah. And then everything starts to break down from there. It's
the
a
best
cancer,
organizations, right? You said it, they feed that culture, they cultivate that culture, they know the culture that they want to create. And so they hire people that fit the culture. Now, does it evolve over time? Of course it does. But hopefully it's positive evolutions and not negative evolutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that comes down to the leadership, keeping the hand on the tiller, as it were, just to make sure everything kind of works. Now, a point that you touched on there about productivity, I've got a question here from one of the team actually in the office. I'll just read it. It says, one of the biggest areas of conflict in the employer-employee RTO, return to office argument, is around productivity. Employees saying that they can be productive working away from the office, and leaders suggesting are disagreeing. In knowledge and creative work, there is a tendency to try and measure productivity by output, quantity. Do you have any thoughts on any better metrics, or is there a better way to do this? I mean, one of our clients, when they were working out productivity, they found, I think it was, I can't remember the number exactly, but it was either 120 or 10 times that amount of metrics to judge productivity. Now, that's rare that you get an organization, I think anyway, that measures that level of detail of productivity. What's your take?
Yeah, so we have what we call our strategic growth system. And we work with clients to implement that, and we actually eat our own dog food, so to speak, right? So we do it for ourselves. And when I talked about the kind of the 6 common elements of a culture of excellence, one of those is 100% accountability.
Yeah.
One of them's engaged and committed teammates, and one of them is 100% accountability. And so part of 100% accountability is having very clear lines of ownership.
Yep.
So you own these things, and you and only you own those things. And so anything that happens within this box of accountability, you own it, you're responsible for it, you make it happen. That's kind of point number 1.
Yeah.
Point number 2 is we meet on a quarterly basis, and in a manner consistent with our our annual goals as a company and our multi-year goals, our strategic goals as a company, we have quarterly priorities that are down to the individual. And usually each individual walks away with 3 to 5 quarterly priorities. And each week in our meeting, we ask them to report on, are you on track or are you off track?
Yep.
If you're on track, we're not even going to talk about it. If you're off track, then there are 2 types of off track. There's off track, but it's under control, meaning that, I was out on holiday for 2 weeks. And so I'm just coming back. So I'm a little bit off track, but I'm under control. Don't need any help. And then there's off track, I need help. And so then we work together to solve it. And so 100% accountability looks like this. If I've agreed to do something by a certain date, let's say Thursday at noon, well, if I see on Tuesday that something is sidetracking me and I'm at risk for delivering that, 100% accountability flags it up and says, hey guys, is Thursday at noon a drop dead for this because I'm off track? Or can I get it to you by Friday? And they're like, oh no, they can get it to us by Friday. Okay, great. We're all good. Or they say, no, I've got a client meeting at 2:00. So noon Thursday is absolutely essential. Okay, then I have to not do this or this in order to get that done for you.
Yeah.
That's what 100% accountability says versus just waiting until Friday morning and hoping they don't ask me about it.
Well, that also implies, sorry, go on.
No. So this culture of accountability, to me, really supplants the need for hard and fast productivity metrics because, productivity is very squishy in a professional, creative work environment. Sales is the easiest thing to measure.
Yep.
Lines of programming code is
Did you hit target?
Yeah, exactly. But in other jobs that are more professional, executive level and others, productivity is tough.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I think that's why people back away from that. I mean, a big component of this, connected with culture, with productivity, with teams, is trust. Now, obviously, being able to trust, Franklin Covey talk about smart trust, or Stephen R. Covey does particularly. Smart trust. You don't just kind of chuck trust out and go, well, yeah, it'll be fine. It's his job. Mm-hmm. There is, as you say, an accountability that comes with the trust. That's 2 sides of the same coin. Trust and accountability. They come as a package, right?
Completely agree with you. And when trust and accountability are misaligned for some reason, or when accountability is suffering, and then conversation needs to happen in the moment. Yeah. And we talk about empowering communication is one of those elements of that culture. And the word empower means to make someone stronger and more confident in dealing with the circumstances they're facing. Well, that doesn't mean I can't have a tough conversation. I may have to have a tough conversation, but I want them to leave that conversation feeling stronger and more confident versus weaker and less confident. Yeah. And even though I've had to have a tough conversation, it's a trust building conversation because I demonstrate that I have this authentic desire for their well-being and for the good of the organization. And those things have to go hand in hand.
It's highly counterproductive to dig out the foundations from underneath your feet.
For sure. Sure.
You bring smart people on to work for you and let them get on with it, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
That's job said. I've worked for a large American company, and it's a very different culture there. I loved working with it because it was so different to the UK culture. But you guys work a different way. You've got a very different mindset around success and action. And that mindset is top of that list. Is everything's possible. It doesn't really matter what it is. Don't worry, everything's possible. I can get there no matter what. It's a North Star for everybody else. They go, really? Are you sure? But it's not just positivity. It's almost like I put it down to like a religious belief, a fervor almost. Why do you think that is? Is that education? Is it just purely the kind of that indomitable spirit? Is it the independence? Because one thing people don't realize about Americans, if they've not spent any time with them, is that you're incredibly independent as a nation, as a people, as an individuals. So why do you think that is? Why is America at the forefront of that?
I experienced that when I lived in the UK, and they would say, oh, you're just, you Yanks you're so optimistic all the time. You're so happy all the time. Cause we would stand in front of the room and we would talk about how excited we are for this and how enthusiastic we are for that. And we're like, are you always just enthusiastic and excited? I think it's probably our youth, quite frankly, and I don't mean my youth, and I mean our youth as a country. I mean, when you look at us, we're the new kids on the block, relatively speaking, to the UK and all of Europe and other continents as well, countries and continents around the world. So we're the new kid on the block, a couple of 100 years, and so we were created from an entrepreneurial endeavor.
Yeah.
And so that spirit of entrepreneurship and the spirit of entrepreneurialism still kind of lives as part of the culture of the organization. So I think it's youth and as a country, and that the fact that our roots were born out of a spirit of entrepreneurialism, and I think that still just kind of permeates who we are as a people.
I remember being on my first town hall when I worked for Franklin Covey, and there were 2,500 people on one big Zoom call. And honestly, if you had the chat on, it was like, and somebody would just come on and introduce themselves. It's like, oh my goodness, it's great to have you on. And it's like, not met them. So
I don't know if it's great or not.
Grumpy Brits, what are you talking about? What is this? We come from, kind of I guess we're more, not pessimistic, but we just see things differently. So, but this is the wonderful thing, connecting with culture and working in different cultures, the fact it's fantastic in an organization to be able to have all of that culture together, all those experiences, because I certainly fed from it. I learned from it hugely, and became a different person because of it. It changed me, and it should do. That's the point, right?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I've had the privilege of working on 5 continents. Each country has its own nuances, if you will. I know in Brazil, I used to teeter on the verge of a nervous breakdown all the time, because I'm a person I'll be 30 minutes early before I will be 3 minutes late anywhere.
Linear. Yes.
And a meeting in Sao Paulo, is scheduled for 9:00. That means there's no way it's going to start before 9:45.
Yeah.
It would be 3 minutes till 9, and we're talking about going down and getting in the car, and I'm like, no, we should have left 45 minutes ago. And so each country has its own nuances, and I've learned a lot from experiencing those as well.
Yeah, certainly me too. I worked, I was head of marketing for Europe, so we dealt with the Swiss Italians, a lot of Germans, and because of our connections all around the globe, there's a lot of contact. So, and everybody does things differently, and you can see that in terms of the way that they approach content, marketing, how their cultures are, based on so many different things. We had Middle Eastern, Chinese, Japanese. It was fascinating to see all those sort of cultural references and elements feeding through as tendrils into the business. And all the better for it, I think. So let's pivot now into some of the stuff that you do. You're investor and author. So let's talk a little bit about investing. Okay. One of the rules that I've read so many times now, we as a small business, so we've been looking at how we fund our business. There tends to be this rule of a 10-to-1 ratio, where an investor comes along and says, I can accept 9/10 that don't work out or don't really make it big because one will. Mm-hmm. Is that a formula that you work to? Is that your experience, or have you got a different set of rules as an investor?
Yeah, we call that portfolio theory, which really is portfolio law now. I think it's my experience is, if you invest, there's going to be one or two complete zeros for sure. Yeah. There's going to be one or two heroes. And then the remainder of them may go south, they may go slightly north, but they're not going, you're going to make all of your returns on one or two of the deals out of that portfolio. Yeah. Now, we don't select deals using that formula. We know that formula will come to roost, right? We're looking at, do we feel like we can get, a 7 to 10 times our return in 5 to 7 years? And that's kind of what we're looking at in the venture capital space. In the private equity space, I hear them use 3 to 5 and 3 to 5, right? A lot of times, can we get 3 to 5 and 3 to 5? And we're more like, can we get 7 to 10 and 5 to 7? Because that, using that kind of measurement and holding ourselves to that set of questioning and investigation and what have you, hopefully we can drive 2 or 3 heroes out of that group of 10 versus just one. But that is portfolio law in our observation.
Yeah. And from your point of view, having that from your portfolio of knowledge that you've got, that aids in that whole process of being an investor in the first place, deciding to be that, and then what you actually invest in.
That's right. That's exactly right. So we have an investment thesis that says, if it's a software as a service company with a software product or data product or AI product or something like that, then we're going to be looking at probably 2 million of annual recurring revenue,
Yep.
and then 50% year-on-year growth. But so those are kind of just the initial kinds of numbers to really deeply look at a company. But then we're going to spend a lot of time looking at the team.
Yeah.
We're going to look at the CEO and the founding team. We're going to look at the breadth of experience. Have they done this before? And we're going to look at a lot of trust-like factors. So how directly do they answer direct questions, or how indirectly do they answer them? If it's in October and they have a current year forecast that they created in January, then I'm going to ask them in October, well, where you said you were going to be at $2.7 million in October. We're in October. Where are you now? Oh no, well, we're at 800,000. Well, then why didn't you update your deck, right? So did you do the work? Are you just hoping that I'm not going to ask, right? And then when we decide to go to due diligence, we say, yeah, we're very interested. We want to go to due diligence. Here's the list of things we need. You can put them in a data room, a Google Drive, a Dropbox folder, or what have you, but we need you to populate these items. If it takes them 2 weeks to fill out that list of items, then they're really not on top of their game. And so every interaction with them is a bit of an interview, and either their reputation or their credibility goes up or it goes down. It seldom stays the same with each interaction.
Yeah. And yes, I guess the balance then is 80% people, 20% numbers, because the numbers are kind of there, right? So there's not too much. You can interrogate those independently, but ultimately it comes down to, right, if I stick a couple of $1 million into this business, $1 million of our investors' money, then I need to make sure that it's in good hands, not just financially, but actually, they're not just going to either sit on that, scribble it away, and put it into projects that just don't make any sense.
That's right. That's exactly right. And even the numbers with startup companies, the more so than the numbers, what are the assumptions underlying those numbers? And are those assumptions realistic, right? We have Shark Tank over here in the US. I don't know if you guys see that as well. And Mr. Wonderful will eviscerate someone who says, well, it's a $30 gazillion market, and if I can just get 1% of it. Well, no. That's not the right way to create a pro forma, right? We start at the bottom and we make some assumptions about the number of clients we can sell, the average sales ticket item, how often the customer will buy, and then the next month, we have to make those build up assumptions and make them credible rather than just this top down lazy man's approach.
Yeah. It's the confusing vanity and sanity metrics, and not understanding that actually the numbers come from their outcomes, from the actions. Right. But you've got to have a plan. You've got to do stuff.
For sure. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So moving on then to books, because there's so much to go through. 3 books. My question was not so much about the books themselves, and we can talk about those probably ad infinitum. You probably have already, but for me, I've worked in publishing. I used to edit magazines years ago. I've worked with a business that its whole backbone of how it worked was from books, and then created content from those books. Now, the challenge for any book is that it takes a long time to do it, and your biggest concern is relevancy, the age, because by the time you've written it, is it still relevant? How do you get through that as a writer yourself, and somebody who's living off their, the all the stuff that they do is thrown into those books as well?
Sure.
So
that's a great question. Some of the books that have had the biggest influence on me over the course of my career are pretty timeless.
Yeah.
I still use concepts. In fact, the definition of teamwork, I still use from a book that was written in 1994 by John Katzenbach called The Wisdom of Teams. And it's because that definition of teamwork still it has stood the test of time. Some of the principles that Jim Collins in Good to Great uncovered with his research, those principles have stood the test of time. So I do think that there's, if we're writing on a very technical subject like software development or other forms of technology, the half-life of that information is about 12 to 14 months, and so it's going to be largely irrelevant or obsolete by the time it's published. I think when we're talking about the process of innovation, not innovations themselves. So the process of innovation, I think, has stood the test of time. The process of being a good leader, the elements that employees look for in leaders, really haven't changed drastically over the years. And so, the two of the books that I've written, they explore kind of high level concepts, but they're more reflective books. There's a short reading. There are 3 or 4 discussion questions or consideration questions at the end of each reading. And so I do think about how does what I'm about to write and publish, how does it stand the test of time, for sure.
And then, just so that people know, the 2 books that you've written yourself are The Innovators, a Field Guide, and The Top Performers Field Guide as well. And then you co-authored a book, Startup Junkies, is that right? Creating Startup Junkies,
and it's about building venture ecosystems in unexpected places. So Arkansas is about the same geographic size as the UK, roughly. You have 70 million or so people, and we have 3 million. And so we are an unexpected place. We're not a Silicon Valley. We're not an Indianapolis. We're not a Boston, New York, or Austin, Texas even. We're Arkansas. And so we've been focused on building a sustainable venture ecosystem here. And we've seen things around the commonalities of sustainable venture ecosystems in Boulder and some of the places I mentioned. And so we talk about 4 principles, 4 pillars, if you will: talent development, creating an entrepreneurial culture, getting engagement from flagship institutions and organizations and employers, and then finally, working to create access to capital at every stage of venture development. So again, it's a principled approach versus a roadmap approach. A roadmap can become obsolete over time, but a principled approach, not so much so.
I mean, and certainly from my experience and from a lot of the books that I've read as well and that stick with me, exactly that. It's not so much about an individual innovation. It is generally about how people act, what they do, kind of their mentality, some of their systems, if you like. I have 2 books at the minute that I'm playing with, and one of the reasons I ask this question is when you go and pick a book, for example, this one, it's how relevant is it for me? Am I just going to waste £13 on a book that when I read it, I go, well, I could get that on the internet. That's the danger, right? Is that internet is, and then the one that I've got stacked up ready to go is this one as well.
I've got that one on my shelf right over there.
So again, I'm in a startup business. We are looking to grow. We don't want to go outside for funding. We want to do it purely on our own merit, not for ego's sake, but we feel that we can. We feel that the opportunity is to do that. Well, but it's that relevancy piece. It's that how, as a buyer of books, it's like, well, goodness me, am I just going to waste 8 hours of my life over a period of time, or 10 hours, however long it takes me to read a book, and not gain anything from it?
And I don't think you ever waste. It's wasteful if you get just one concept, just one insight.
Absolutely.
And that's what I tell folks. That look, I recommend a lot of books, but in no instance do I think you should take that book and strip everything out of it and create a recipe or a checklist for yourself. Pick out the things that resonate, pick out the ahas and the new insights. And I just look for 1 or 2 things out of everything that I read, and how might I apply this to my business? And if I don't and I can't, then at least I've exercised my thought processes and my
and that's about not trying to copy people, because that's the point of innovation, right? You don't try and copy, you try and find a problem that's not been solved.
Very much so. A problem that has not been solved, or that you can solve better than someone else.
Yeah.
And Ash Maurya wrote the book Running Lean, from which we get the lean canvas, and he's very much somebody that we recommend for entrepreneurs. And he says that we should fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem we're trying to solve, and the magnitude of the problem, because that's what people will pay for, is solving a big problem. There are nagging problems that people have tried to build businesses around, but the problem is not enough people would buy the solution at the price point required for it to be a profitable ongoing concern, because they didn't do a good enough job on the front end of understanding the problem and whether the problem was a real big problem or not.
Yeah. And warrants actually somebody going, I'm going to put money into that.
Yeah. People will complain about a nuisance.
Yeah.
But they won't pay to have someone solve it for them.
No, they won't. Wow. So, what did you think?
Well, I'm not sure you guys could be covering more stuff. You're covering absolutely every avenue. It's amazing. I mean, he's got some very good insights. It's really interesting the way that he's approaching certain things that that I might have read in a book or listened to a podcast before or something like that, where they've gone the one way and I've taken a couple of nuggets from that, and I can see how that then relates to what Jeff's saying. There was one bit where I think I would stand with a lot of other developers and argue against his metric for measuring productivity for developers, but we'll come on to that. But I mean, if we start with the hybrid working bit, I thought that was really interesting, because it highlights that this isn't a brand new thing. Some people have been doing it before, but so he said the mid-90s he was doing working from home, and it was available from the listed company, the publicly listed company that he was working for, and the main things that I saw from that were that it was intentional. They had a policy. They had, it wasn't just what I feel a lot of people have at the moment, where we've just sort of come to an agreement about it. Not an agreement. We've sort of compromised. Sorry, is what I was going to say. And that's it's sort of the worst of every world. It was this is a company thing.
Everybody loses in a compromise, really.
Yeah, exactly. This is a definite thing. We've got a policy. You have to have an ergonomic chair. You have to have a desk. You have to have a proper setup. But also, the company can withdraw that ability to work from home if they think that you're not performing. So that for me was it shows that actually I feel like we do get into that. It's an employer against employee battle. It's the two poles. Whereas this is we want you to be productive. We want you to be happy and healthy and a good employee. So we're going to try to help you to do that. And if that means that you can work from home, brilliant. If it means that actually you can't work in that unstructured way, then we'll either help you or whatever it is, we'll try to make sure that you're actually, we'll protect you as an employee, I guess, is sort of where I was taking that.
What we kept kind of coming back round to in a lot of this, dotted throughout the conversation, was this is about trust. At the kind of one of the central emotions around this and tenets of this is about businesses trusting, leaders trusting, managers trusting, because people don't go to work and want to do a bad job.
I guess if people do, if people do, or if they are doing a bad job, then it's about the leaders and their managers to actually try to address that. I think it's the worst thing where you see someone's doing a bad job and you write them off. That's the biggest issue. And if you've got a trusting environment, that person might not be doing a bad job because they're wanting to. It might be they're trying to do the best, but they need someone to help them along the way. So I think that's really interesting.
I was looking at what was I wrote the blog some time ago now around kind of what is the office anyway, and this whole kind of paradigm, this 500-year-old paradigm that in fact most people probably don't really think of offices. They've always been around, and remote working was something that the Dutch I always get the name of this company wrong. It's in all the movies. Basically, in about 1756, the the Dutch shipping company, everybody knows the name of it except for me, but look, they had remote working as a principle anyway, because they dotted people all over the world to run their offices for them, and they worked from their own homes to do that.
Yeah.
Think about governors running countries. I mean, okay, let's not talk about colonialism, because that's not a great piece of English history, but it's nothing new, is it? That's the point. The whole principle of this is, and that he just highlighted that really well, to say, I was doing this 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's really interesting then, like moving into the performance management and performance sort of tracking, because that's obviously such an enormous thing at the moment. And well, this is where I disagree with him, because well, in one part, I agree that sales does seem to be quite an easy thing to track, because it's, have you reached your sales target? But I still think there are so many other bits that could be in there. You might not have reached your sales target, and it might not be that you're performing badly. It's being affected by something else. And so I'm not completely convinced that it's that cut and dry. Similarly, with the lines of code being a good indicator of a coder's performance. I mean, I can write something in 5 lines and it will be fantastic, or I can write it in 100 lines and it will actually be unreadable and fall over. So I think there are. It's not that cut and dry, but then I liked his sort of performance indicators, where it was the way that they did it was based on a very good, healthy relationship within the team, where you could be vulnerable and honest and say, I'm what does he say? Off track, on track, off track. Yep. If you're on track, then everyone assumes it's fine. If you're off track, then you say, is it under control, or you need help? And at no point in that was there a blame game. It was, if you need help, it's, well, okay, so let's help you. And the other team members or the mentors or the managers dedicating time to actually help that person out.
What do you need?
So I think that's where it falls apart a lot. And it relates to something that I know you're going to talk about in the second part, with sort of managers, and where managers can see someone's off track and they do need help, but they don't dedicate any time to actually resolve that. So all you end up with is an employee that's completely losing their mind, because they're trying their hardest in a lot of cases, some cases not, but they're trying their hardest and they can't achieve what the manager's expecting. But then the manager's just saying, just do it. Not, okay, let's actually sit down, work out what's going wrong. Okay, I can see that you've just got far too many tasks. So I'll manage that and we'll move off that. And that's why I was looking at some stats the other day, where something like 400,000 people in the UK are signed off on long-term sick from mental illness. And that's one of the leading causes of that is poor management and overwork, which is also poor management. So this is a serious problem that we need to start getting right.
Yeah, what was the stat as well? Something like 83% of managers haven't been trained in management.
Yeah, it was the CMI, the Chartered Management Institute, said 82% are accidental. 82% of accidental managers have no training. So, and again, we'll probably come on to it in the second one, talking about a bit more like mentorship and stuff like that. But that was, it requires good management, and it requires empowering your team to be able to come to you to say, I've got a problem. I'm trying to meet this deadline, but I can't.
I think it was also kind of pointing out as well, though, so to kind of not defend him, but kind of add to that, was certain areas of business are really easy to track in terms of productivity. You can, it's relatively easy to go, right, if you've got a target of 5,000 units and you do 4,999, I'm cool with that. That's fine. You're kind of being productive. Whereas if it was a stuff that doesn't have a deadline, like I've got, I don't know what jobs don't have deadlines these days, but if you haven't got a deadline, or the deadline's a bit woolly, or it's you don't count stuff in that role, maybe a designer, you've got a deadline which you've got to produce, but how long is it that you take to produce? What are the steps every day that you take? So I think it is more about trying to understand what productivity means, and then, as you say, it's that kind of, are you on track, or if you're trusting your team to do their work, and supporting them. Maybe it's the team management is the wrong word, because that's top down. Perhaps, when people talk about coaching, you talk about, well, that seems to me that you're kind of a mixture of player coach as a leader. Perhaps you shouldn't be called a leader anymore. Perhaps perhaps the title's name. You're not managing people. You're coaching them through a situation.
Let's shelve the term leader. That's a
good one for later.
Yeah, I like that. That's yeah. What's
But I do think, that's all right. I do think he was. I think he was highlighting the fact there that some roles are really easy to go, well, that's productive. That's what we understand to be productive. Yeah. Other roles are very difficult to, because they don't have deadlines or timeframes and stuff. It's much harder to do that. So, and maybe it's that we need to look at, and I think the other part of it as well was setting realistic goals.
Yes. Yeah.
Not right. You did 5,000 units last month. I want you to do 25,000 this month. It's like, what?
Yeah. But again, if you've got that environment where you can speak up, and if you speak up, you will be heard.
Yeah.
That means that you won't ever. Well, you shouldn't have that scenario where you're like, come on, you're having a laugh. There's no way I can achieve that.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially with what I've been reading about with this sort of increase in people being on long-term sick, is the knock-on effect that has with the team, is that, because it gets very difficult. Managers don't know what they're doing. If I had someone that was going off on long-term sick from a mental health illness, I wouldn't know how to approach that. I'd have to go and learn that myself. It's not just, and the biggest worry is if I say something wrong, that might make them, deteriorate even further. But also the rest of the team then have to pick up that work. So in that scenario, if you've got someone that is then picking up the extra work and goes, I can't do this, and now I've got all of these other deadlines, you do need to be realistic, and also be able to say, I can't achieve that, and that means that actually you don't then have to achieve it. I'm saying it in a bad way, but
no, I know what you mean. It's they know their job, and they probably know it better than the manager or the leader, whoever's the coach, whatever phrase you want to use to do that. So trusting them to know that, but asking them the right questions in, for example, good quality one-to-ones. Like, I see you're a little bit off. You know what? Rather than the stick to beat them, it's the right. How can I help you through this? Moving the rocks out of the way of the path for them to actually achieve, and realizing that we're not robots. We're not. We don't, do 27.4795 things every day. That's not how we operate.
Yeah, exactly.
And particularly in a hybrid work situation where we had it just a second ago. I had somebody come to the door, bing bong. It's like, wasn't expecting that. Kids, dogs. Something happens. A pipe bursts. Your car breaks down. All this normal stuff that everyone has to deal with, particularly at home.
Actually, that's really interesting from the first part that he was talking about, where they were able to work from home, that as part of the policy, you had to have childcare set up.
Yeah.
Obviously that's something that's changed since the pandemic, because now there's actually we can fit life things around work. As long as you're getting your stuff done and achieving those deadlines and you're on track, you can have a bit more freedom and autonomy to do your own things. So that was an interesting thing. I wonder if they still have that policy where, no, you have to have a desk. You can't have your kids there. You can't be waiting for the Amazon delivery guy or whatever. It's it's
well, it's that
to find it out.
Rubbing out of those lines at the beginning and the end of the day. That 9 o'clock. Where's that come from? Well, 1729. The factory opened, bang, you were there at the crack of dawn, and you left when the target was hit. And we've still got this slight mentality now. You rub out the 5 o'clock or the 5:30 or the 6 o'clock, and actually now it's because we should be concentrating on what you're able to produce. And are you on track or off track, to use Jeff's phraseology? That's a more interesting approach, surely.
Yeah, exactly. It was also interesting with the stuff he was talking about with the investment, and how. So for as I was listening to that, I was going back to my sort of product manager brain and thinking about, and actually with the learning in the books and what he's been training people, where it's, you fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
I love that.
I've worked in companies where they've got a solution looking for a problem to solve, that sort of thing, or it's a problem that's actually not big enough. It is that niggle,
Yeah.
and you throw time and effort into doing this, and you're like, why isn't everyone using it? I mean, one of the things that we do is we use our own product, because that's how that you're actually solving that problem. If we don't use it, I've worked at companies where we should have been using the product and trying to get the team to actually use it. There was so much pushback. I was like, if we can't do it, and we're meant to be, this is our baby, and we're not prepared to do it, how can you possibly expect a customer to do it? So that was really interesting. I thought that was very useful for a product manager or anyone basically building a product or a business.
Yeah, I loved that. That's one of the things I think that will stay with me. And it's not the first time I've heard it, but a nice little reminder to fall in love with the problem and make sure that it's, as you say, it's not a niggle. It's a blue light on the kettle rather than a red one. That's a niggle.
Wow. If that starts to wind you up, gotta be careful. But yeah, so I mean, that's it's really interesting. I have to admit, I haven't actually read his books yet, but I'm definitely going to, because I think
me too.
He's got a huge amount of knowledge there, and it's really interesting as well. It's like, if you just if you can take one thing away and put that in with all of your other learnings, that's how we improve as people, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the book thing for me, because I've written books before, I've written magazines before, loads of news articles and magazines and stuff like that. And the point about the relevancy piece, and particularly when I work for Franklin Covey, obviously they trade off their IP, which is their Stephen R. Covey, Stephen M. R. Covey, for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, etc., Speed of Trust. In actual fact, we've got a guest coming on from Franklin Covey in the not too distant future, so it's interesting because they talk a lot about very similar things to what Jeff does, because they're a leadership company and stuff like that. But this guy is talking about leadership in a hybrid world, so that's coming up. But it's how did they keep their books relevant? That was the bit, because it wasn't to catch him out; it was generally to find out, well, how can you innovate a book that's 2 years old? How can you call that a book about innovation or something, when it's like, but software moves on at a rate. We've been looking at software just recently, and there's 20 different bits of software to do one thing. It's, oh my god, how did you choose? So the relevancy of something from 2 years ago is just like, but I thought his answer was great around that, actually it's the process of innovation, not innovation itself.
Principled approach rather than a roadmap. That was it's absolutely, because there are all of the books the short books that promise you instant results in 7 steps, and like, follow this roadmap, and you go, but I can't, because that bit's not relevant to me, which means that actually the whole thing falls apart. But the principled approach is that's something that you can pick and take what you need to, that's appropriate to you, and maybe all of it will be appropriate, just not at this one time. So
but it also feeds into, and we talked about culture and all sorts of things there, about leadership and culture of leadership and all those things. But you think about, if you're basing it on principle-centered leadership, principle-centered innovation, principles in human nature don't really change. We've not had this massive leap in change of principles, the trust, honesty, talking straight, all sorts of things like that. They are standard and we need more of that in business, more transparency, etc. So I think, very, very interesting approach, but also one that the point is, in business, you need to be able to replicate stuff and have, and kind of be predictable. And that, using principles, when they're kind of, in theory, if it's a principle, it hits a block and it doesn't go any further. It's like, no, we don't do that. Or, no, we do that.
And that ties in so nicely with what he was saying about culture at the beginning as well, where he was like, your culture is something that you have to work on, and the hybrid has just moved the way that you build culture to be a slightly different thing. But also, you have to, if you've got these core values, you have to live by them. These principles, you should be living by them, because if you don't, and I think he said, I've got it written down here, if you're not prepared to fire someone who blatantly violates your core values, then they're not core and they're not values, they're just flowery words. And when I heard that, I thought, how many of those sorts of, let's do an off-site thing where we'll come up with our 5 main principles, and then everyone tries to cringingly inject it into what they're saying, oh yes, we're giving back, or we're focused, or whatever those flowery words are. Like, in that case, it's all rubbish. But if you can build it out of your culture, then it can be part of your core values, and then you can hire for it to improve your culture. And
Absolutely.
sometimes you do need to, let people go who don't conform to those.
No, absolutely right. I mean, and obviously I mentioned about microcultures within cultures and stuff like that, but I think that's super important, particularly right now. I mean, I was talking with a chap yesterday who was talking about, he's a networking guy. He's my financial chap as well, and he goes to these networking groups, and one of the biggest topics that comes up every single time is about hybrid working and how just to keep it working, and keep a culture, and it's hybrid working and how do you keep the culture, hybrid working, how do we keep a culture. Now, I think he's some of his clients have like HR businesses and stuff like that, so having those principle based values within your business, they will travel with everybody no matter where they are. Whether they're in Stockholm, whether they're in New York, whether they're in Sydney. These are the values of the business, and most skills you can train. Principles and values in people, they have to be there.
And it's not about writing them on the wall so that everyone can see them when you walk in. It's about having it in that sort of intangible culture. Like you said, do we have a lot of laughter in the office, or is it very serious? That is part of the culture. And if you have a very serious office and you hire someone who's a bit of a joker, that's going to, you'll get that culture clash. And then what do you do about it? Because that's when it starts to become toxic.
But not just that, as a hybrid worker, somebody who sits at the desk all day, you've got a set of rules that you abide by when you're making your decisions, because you don't manage time, you make decisions, and you have priorities. So when you're making those decisions, what are you basing them on? Well, your internal values. Yes, you've got time frames and deadlines, all this kind of stuff, but when stuff gets a bit tough, what are the principles and values that you as an individual, kind of agree with? What's the symbiosis with the company? And so you can make decisions around, that I've just got to think about, Beth in that department, that if I do that, that's not going to do well with her. I can't talk to her about it because she's away. So I'm going to have to make a decision based on what I think is best for her, not me necessarily, or what's best for the business. That's really going to affect her. I can't dump that on her lap because I'm going on holiday. I won't get to talk to her. Imagine a scenario like that. So I think for a hybrid worker, having those values and principles as a baseline to as a foundation to make decisions from is super powerful. Because they travel. They just travel everywhere with you.
Well, it's I can't remember which book it was, but it was something about, as a leader, you shouldn't. Oh, sorry, we're getting rid of that word. As a leader, you, if you are in a team and you say, we're not doing that because of this reason, whatever the task is, you want to do that enough so that then when you're not in the meeting, everyone knows that that's what's expected. So then they'll go, is this something that our leader would accept? Is that the right quality or whatever it is? But so it's creating that unwritten, intangible thing that almost rules that people abide by organically. They don't have to think about it.
But that's created through, we come back to the big T word, it's trust. It's creating the business leaders, people who own the company, the management team, whoever it is, creating that environment of trust that people can work within. And know that, when you come back and go, well, I perhaps wouldn't have made that decision that way, but do you know what? That's fine. Why would I employ somebody and then not allow them to use their brain and their ability? Exactly.
Hire smart people and let them get on with their work.
What is it that if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to either change to a different room or change the people you're with? You're in the wrong room, or what is it? Obviously, I'm not the smartest person in the room.
Oh, that really well known, that line that comes to your mind straight away. Right,
Anyway, everybody knows what I mean. They're smart people. They're smarter than me, so they'll go. It's all right, Adam. We got it.
Cool. Well, I mean, I guess we've talked quite a bit about this, so we should probably wait to go over the second bit. What do you guys talk about in the second? In the second half, we it's kind of three things really. Again, super insightful again, but we talk about kind of innovation. What is an innovation consultant? Because I was like, sounds a bit flowery.
But then I wanted to just give a little bit of insight into asking him about himself. Routines. But what's his daily routine? What does he do? Is there anything special? Does he like do 14 hours of yoga and then he starts work? So basically he doesn't sleep. But then the last one, really, as an educator, what's the big three things that he teaches? Kind of, because he centers around innovation and finance for his education pieces. So it's, what are you telling kind of startups these days, people who've got ambitions to be kind of micro or entrepreneurs of the future? So yeah, we get his insights on that.
And that, I assume, that'll be also really relevant for entrepreneurs in inverted commas, but also like anyone that's involved in building a product. As I said, with the beginning stuff he was talking about, I was just like, as a product manager, these are the things that I was worried about, and these are the things that I had to make sure that I got right. So that, because as a product manager, you're trying to make sure you're building the right thing that someone will use and that solves someone's problem. So that's great. Well, I'll see you there then, I guess.
Yeah, see you on the other side.
Cool.
Thanks, John.
Cheers, Adam.